Welcome back to another episode of the Chinanna Show. I'm your host Anna Banana, and today's topic we're going to discuss consent. Now, earlier today, I had a conversation with guest Leah, and we spoke about what consent means to us and how it affects us when our rights of saying yes is taken away from us. Now, if you're interested in this topic, stay tuned as we're going to get right into it. Remember to share this with your friends, family, and anyone that this podcast episode might bring value to. This podcast episode will be available on all streaming platforms: YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anywhere else where you do get your podcasts. And again, stay tuned. Thank you for listening. We'll get right into it.
So Leah, thank you so much for coming to this talk, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast episode and for all the technical difficulties that we have been experiencing since after one trying to get the recording to go smoothly. So today's topic, we're going to talk about consent. And it's a very heavy topic because I realize that a lot of us, especially in my culture, we don't take it as something important. So I just want to start off with, what does consent mean to you, Leah?
Well, thank you for addressing this topic and bringing me in to discuss it. I would say, I've thought a lot about consent and my own experiences that involved the lack of consent when you got in touch with me. And there were two major ones that had popped up. And there's so many questions about like what is consent surrounding those two experiences. And I would say that for me to really have a strong definition of consent would be, basically it has to be enthusiastic. I think everybody knows that, a man jumping out of the bushes is not consent. Everyone knows that. But there are these gray areas, which should not be gray. I think a way to really clear them up is to say that the other person should be very much into the idea of whatever is going on.
Yeah.
You do not pressure someone to do something that they don't want to do. You are the person that you would like to engage with is very clear in their yes, and also too has a full awareness of what's going on. So, for example, if someone is drugged, if someone is very, very drunk, this makes consent not really possible. I understand that there are circumstances where you have a long-term partner and you two have had these discussions and you come home and you're a little bit tipsy. I'm not talking about that so much as I'm talking about people that you do not know and you are placing your trust in, or someone that you've just never engaged with in this way. Like, you can't give consent without a clear head, without having a discussion beforehand. So the consent has to be enthusiastic and clear with a strong awareness of what's going on.
Yes, that I do agree with. Sometimes with consent as well, they have to know what they are saying yes to as well, because there is a lot of situations, especially referring to the series I May Destroy You, when, I don't know if you guys ever seen this series, but it stars the main character. She was drugged and raped, and it plagued her throughout the entire series until she find out who it was. But she was having like this relationship with this other writer person guy, and during sexual intercourse he took off the condom and she did not know, and then he pretended as if it was his right, like he was uncomfortable, so he took it off like it was no big deal. But you cannot consent to something if you don't know what is going on.
Right.
That is fairly unfair. You can't just in the middle of it, someone agreeing to have protected sex with you and then you just take it off and they don't know. That means the consent is then being revoked. So the person, whatever they're consenting to, they have to be completely aware, as Leah said before, and there is no backtrack. They have to know exactly what they are saying yes to.
Yeah, no, absolutely 100% on the same page with that.
Yeah, because the men or people in general, because we aren't educated when it comes to consent. We believe that, rape or whatever it is, or sexual harassment, it only comes in one form, as in someone jumping out of the bushes or
right.
someone grabbing you, and that is rape. But anything else isn't considered rape. I don't think we are educated on the other areas of what is considered consent and how important it is, because coercing someone as well is also considered. It might not be like a big form of rape, but I would consider it a form of rape, because you're then trying to get the person to say yes over and over, and they are uncomfortable with it, but you're still forcing them to say yes, and they are saying yes even when they're not comfortable with it. That is wrong as well.
Right, I agree. And there's a lot of there's power dynamics to consider there as well. I mean, I've heard many stories where women have, no. And things did not escalate to where they were literally being held down to where they could not move. But they thought to themselves, you know what, if I say no to this situation, this could escalate and be really violent. And maybe rather than get, hurt really badly, I should just put up with this and it'll be done in 5 minutes. And it's like, when those are your options, that's terrible. No one should be in that situation. No one should be in this situation where it's like, if I don't do this thing, somehow I'm going to hurt, or they're going to hurt somebody that I care about. It should just stop, with a no, it should just stop, and stop what you're doing, and anything less than that is really an abuse of power, is what it is.
Yes, it is. And some people, all right, I understand. I know a lot of us women have at least one scenario where we like a guy and we go over his house, but we really don't want to have any sexual intercourse with him. Right. We're just trying to get how he operates in his personal space. But then all of a sudden we are being pushed into a situation where if we don't sleep with this guy, or if he pushes himself on us, then we aren't going to be able to say no, because we are the one that went over his house. It's like taking away our right from us when we say, okay, let me come over and see how you operate in your personal space. We as women, or anyone at all, entering into your space does not give you the right to my body, and it doesn't give you the right for me to not say no to you.
Right. And I fully agree with that. And I think too that, something for men to think about is, and this is certainly far less impactful than the experience of a sexual assault itself, but something to think about is when you've been through the ringer like this so many times, there's what things should be and what things are. And then if you create this culture where there's that expectation, well, women are eventually, they're not going to trust, you know what I'm saying? They're not going to trust these situations at all. And I think it is very unfair when men will say, well, you shouldn't judge me. This isn't fair. I'm not like them. And I'm so, well, don't talk to me. And my reaction situation, go talk to other men because they're rooting it for you. There are men that are, there's enough men that are creating these kinds of expectations and these kinds of scenarios to where now, if you should find yourself with a man who does not expect these things, now you feel very distrustful. If men would talk to each other about these things and say, dude, knock it off. And, maybe we could all feel a little bit more safer and a little bit trusted, but it's a lot to take on when I've experienced this. When men feel very offended about my lack of trust. And I said, go, instead of coming to me, talk to the root of the source, because this is now impacting you, because this is prevalent enough to where I feel an overall distrust of these situations.
Yes, I totally agree. I've had men that are so upset, saying things like, oh, well, am I them? You can't generalize. I'm not like that. But when you have 10 apples and 9 of them are bad, you're not going to trust that one of them is good.
Right? If you're going to go fishing and 95% of the fish are poisoned, you're probably not going to fish in that lake, right? You're going to be real careful.
Exactly. But they don't look at it like that. They look at it as we generalizing and being miserable about the situation, but it is an actual problem. We can't walk at night. We can't do certain things that they can do.
Yeah.
And I think that is very unfair when it comes to consent. If I say no, how is me saying no to you have anything to do with you and your personality?
Right.
I should have a right to say no. Like, I don't understand. And as it relates, I think consent is something that should be taught when you are like interaction wise. And I think there's subtle ways you can also teach it to your children, because I've had situations when I was younger, let's say about 5-6 years old, you know, like when you'd go to those family dinners and you as a child, you just don't feel comfortable. And the parents is that they don't really understand that sometimes as a child, just because you make the rules and you provide food and everything else for us doesn't mean that we don't have feelings or rights. Because if I'm explaining to you that I don't feel comfortable when Uncle Tom hugs me, or I don't want Auntie May to hug me, why do you feel like I deserve a beating or I'm being disrespectful just because I don't want anyone to touch me? I think taking away the right from a child is sending a very big signal. So as that child grow up, because this happens to me, so this is from personal experience, when that child grow up, it's like you're saying that they don't have a right to say no at all, and they have to just accept anything that happens, because saying no is disrespectful to others. That's the type of message you're sending. And then when certain bad things happen to them and they don't know how to respond, you're going to then go ahead and blame the child for not saying and doing anything, when you already subconsciously put that in their head that they're not allowed to reject certain types of touches or reject certain types of behavior from adults.
Yeah. I'm encouraged by the fact I have, younger cousins and such who are, becoming mothers now, and I'm seeing them teach these lessons to their kids, and they'll post about it on social media and stuff. And I'm like, well, thank God, because, I had the same experience growing up where, okay, so, I grew up in the 80s, and do you know who Emmanuel Lewis is? I'm not sure if we're in the same generation. But...
Not sure.
Okay, because I wasn't sure if you were a much younger person. Like, who's that? Well, so Emmanuel Lewis used to have these commercials that were say no, then go, and then tell someone. And that had to do with like the man in the van, the stranger with the candy, and this and that. And we had very much drilled in, do not get into cars with strangers, and don't take candy from strangers, and don't let strangers touch you, and this and that. And we're very protected in that regard. But the reality is that most of these like unwanted touching and contact do not happen from a man in a van who pulls up to the school. Those are the most dramatic types of scenarios, but the reality is it's usually somebody that and we were not taught about these boundaries with like other kids. If boys touched, it was like, well, that's boys being boys, that's how they show they like you. And if it's an adult, like you said, there's this expectation where it's like this is your family member, and have respect, and this and that. And it's as if they could do no wrong, and that's why this stuff happens, in religious context as well. I think obviously that's been cleaned up quite a bit since I've been an adult. But when I was a kid, this stuff was happening, the whole congregation would get together and cover it up and that kind of thing. And it's like, what are we teaching people? Because then they become adults who, like you said, don't know how to say no, or they become an aggressor themselves to somebody else because it was done to them.
Exactly. I've seen that happen multiple times. And also, sometimes parents would attempt to teach their children good touch from bad touch and what is acceptable and what isn't. But it's more so towards strangers and not exactly to certain family members or family members in general, because they want to, sometimes they view, parents have this thing about them that they believe that their children's behavior has a lot to do with how they brought them up, and that they take a lot of responsibility for certain behaviors. So they don't want the child to come off in a certain type of way because they think that they want to be accepted by others. So the child coming off a way will cast a bad light and cause people to reject them in a certain way. So which is why they don't really listen to their child when their child try to highlight certain type of behaviors. And sometimes they're so strict and so let's go with the term abusive for, or verbally abusive, and quick to shout at the child, that the child doesn't even trust them enough to say, hey, mom, every night this is happening to me, or uncle is doing this to me, because they are afraid of how they are going to react to them, and even possibly blaming them, even when they don't even fully understand what is going on. They just know that they feel completely wrong about it. So it causes the child to be in a very vulnerable state because there's nobody they can trust to speak to. And then hence Uncle John or whomever gets away with constantly doing all these things to the child.
You really nailed it when you said that it's the parent almost sees this child as an extension of themselves and of their ability to raise a child and that kind of thing. And my feeling is, it's like, I'm out of your body now. Like, yes, you are supposed to raise me and make sure that I become a good citizen someday. But the reality is like, once I am out of your body, I am an independent body. My body is mine. I have agency. I wish I was could you imagine a 4-year-old actually saying these things? Like, I wish I had
understand what is going on.
Yeah, I should have the vocabulary of the time to say this is my body. And it's like in anything from abuse, which we all know is wrong, but even if it's just like, I don't want to hug that relative, I don't want to do that, like this is my body and I shouldn't have to, you know what I'm saying? Like this is a personal thing that I own, and if this is taught at a very young age, it really, and again, I wish that for myself that this kind of thing, I mean, yes, obviously it was very much reinforced, like, don't let anyone touch you in this place and whatever, but just an overall, a stronger sense of agency.
Exactly. But we are not taught. So how do you expect us to go out there when you are shutting down a child consistently for years and they have been programmed? They're going to need the help in order to learn how to function as adults and to say no. And that's why a lot of people in general have a lot of codependency, or we have a lot of traits where we avoid certain conflicts, or we do whatever we can to avoid conflicts. Because when you grow up in an abusive type of household, there is no such thing as consent. You just have to try and survive it. Like, you're trying to do everything so that the person doesn't blow up on you, and that is your life consistently until you move. So imagine doing that for 1 to 16 years, or however long you take to move out of that household. Let's say from 1 to 20 years old, you get the opportunity to move out. You're going to have to erase that programming, and that's not something that is easy.
Right.
That's going to be a lot of work and a lot of help, and that is why they sometimes are drawn to people who represent the core person of that household. Is because of human beings and how we are functioning in routine, and it takes a while to kind of get out that stuff, and a lot of help as well to kind of get out that stuff and learn that, hey, I actually have rights, and I have the right to say no or yes, or move or go for myself.
I totally agree. And the thing is too, is like, there's the household. And then if the household is failing, well, this is an opportunity for the school to step in. But, when I was taught sex ed, it was the basics. It was like, this goes here and this goes here. And this is how babies happen and whatever. And I thought, what we could have also been talking about at that time, which I think they do in some schools with kids now, but about the concept of enthusiastic consent, like right in middle school, like right when, makeouts and that kind of things are starting to happen, like along with the basics, the biological basics, teaching kids, don't pressure other children to do things they don't want to do, read facial expressions, and to see people as entire people with agency. And that goes a long way. And the biggest, I think, the self-defense move, because at the end of the day, sometimes the only person you can trust is to teach the kids in sex ed it's okay to say no whenever you want. It doesn't matter how popular the other kid is. It doesn't matter how they look or how far you've gone before or with someone else or how far you've gone that day. And you can say no at any time, and you should never, ever, ever let someone shame or push you into things that you don't want to do. You don't owe an explanation. And I think that actually came up in that show, right? I Will Destroy You with the two men, right? Where things started and it was going okay. But it was like, well, I don't want to keep going. And that's when that man was assaulted.
Yes, and he wasn't even, and I really like that show because it doesn't show, it shows from a woman perspective, but it also shows from a man perspective as well, because he said yes initially, but after he did not want to do it again, and the man forced himself on him, and he had no one to report it to because he was gay. So him going out there and trying to get some help for himself, just like Amabel was trying to get help for herself, nothing was being done because it wasn't, how they are with men already. Even in Jamaica, in our very outdated laws, women can be raped, but for men it's considered bigotry or something like that. So it's not even considered rape, but it's actually it. Yes.
So no protection at all.
No protection. And then because our country itself is very homophobic, and because of that as well, it causes a lot of men to keep this thing to themselves and not speak out, which in reality just prevents them, makes them more vulnerable for people to target them, because they're not going to want to speak out, because they're going to say, oh, am I gay, and start to question everything as it relates to their sexuality, even when they were just literally hurt and it was not their fault. So they don't have the help to process what is happening. They don't have the resources, and the country is bashing them for something that happens to them. In my opinion, that is even worse than women constantly getting raped and not having resources, because let's be realistic. God forbid if that was to happen to me, I know I could tell someone, and even that one person would fight for me. Even if everyone is trying to victim blame me, that one person would fight for me. But men out here and in that situation wouldn't really have anyone to fight for them, because they'd be so scared to even say what is happening because of the repercussions that they might experience from that happening. So it's really, really, and especially for the fact that this is 2021 going 2022 and we're still facing all of this, just really shows what type of growth are we experiencing,
Yeah, I mean, it's that. I have so much empathy for that situation, because I just think about, it's like, this is probably something that this person has been going through since they were a kid. They had no one to turn to, and no adults to turn to. And it's like, here I'm an adult, and I'm still not enough.
And they still get away with it because they know that the child won't say anything.
Yeah. I mean,
it's not that difficult to just say anything. When there's a possibility that there will be people that will want to hurt you physically for something that it's not even your fault or you didn't cause it.
And it really shapes a person, because, if that education had existed, like, the first I mean, listen, I've worked through it and been to therapy and whatever, but like the first time that I ever had my consent violated, you know, it wouldn't have happened, and it did shape me, and I don't think that you can like totally turn that back, you know. And I don't want to
Yeah.
I don't want to see that happen to I don't want to just keep seeing this happen,
Anyone.
the cycle perpetuated with kids, just generation after generation. Like, it's got to stop.
So what we have to do now, since we have the knowledge, we have to ensure that the kids or the children, they create an environment that they feel safe overall, or even your friends and family, because let's be real, it's not just happening to kids these days, it's happening to us as old as we are, big as we are. So we have to create like a safe space for our friends and family and children, so that they do feel comfortable. Even if they don't feel comfortable going to anyone, we feel comfortable going. We feel comfortable, or they feel comfortable coming to us, even if they don't feel comfortable going to others.
Yeah, absolutely. I like, your age, no matter your age, no matter your gender, no matter the gender of the other person. Yes.
We have to lead by example, because if we don't, then it still goes on. Like, it still will continue to go on. And even though one person can't really affect change, we can in our own lives.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like I said, you know, there's not much that one can do about, you know, the things that have happened to you have happened, and the best that you can do is try to apply what you've learned and pass those lessons on to other people who are still struggling with what essentially is self-advocacy, right? To
yes.
Really standing up for yourself and what your rights are, and not allowing some kind of dominant narrative that was never created to serve to be of service to you, but it's this narrative exists to support a certain, you know, power structure. And then once you can see that, you'd be like, oh, I don't actually need to subscribe to this at all. I can create a narrative that to protects me, because sometimes, you know, you feel like you're the only one you got. It's like, if I don't stand up for me, who will, right? You know, there's support, but like, I think it's really important to, like, yes, teach people of all ages that this kind of thing is not okay, and exactly what consent is and what they can do if that consent's violated. Totally in agreement.
And how it affects someone else when their consent is being violated as well.
Yes.
So going forward, what does consent mean to you as individually? How would you feel safe and comfortable if someone is to propose consent to you?
Oh, you mean, how would I, like, how will I handle a situation? I'm not sure if I totally understand the question.
What does consent look like to you? Like, how would you want someone, if you're going to engage in any sexual act or anything overall, how would you want someone to ask you for consent?
Well, sure. Wow. Okay. So, I mean, I am of one that will be very clear. And at this time, I mean, it took me a long time to get here, you know, but I might be a bit of an easier case, because I will be very clear about what I'm okay with and what I am not okay with. And personally, if this is a first time thing and we're new, I want to have that discussion ahead of time to say, hey, what are you okay with? What are you not okay with? And if we are to engage in something that is, you know, I would say anything that's not would be considered vanilla per se. I'd be like, I would want to be asked about that. Obviously, if someone initiates something without doing so, I will shut it down immediately. And sometimes there can be some miscommunications there, because vanilla is different things, different people. But ultimately, you know, if I say, oh, I don't want to do that, just okay. The only answer is okay.
Yes.
You know, and also the thing about the non-consensual condom removal. Man, I've story about that. But
that's scary, because just imagine that happening to you. This is the only protection you have in terms of protecting you from unwanted pregnancy, and that guy hasn't said anything, and you trusting in that person so much, do not think to say, let me check for a condom or whatever. Then next you know, you're pregnant and this guy completely ghosts you.
Right. That's and now it's the situation is basically where it's like I have to state that up front. Now I will say though that I am probably pretty unpopular in the heterosexual dating world at this point, because the reality is that I simply will not have sex with you. I see my body at this point. I see it like the keys to my house, right? So I'm not just going to give the keys to my house for you to throw a party if I don't know you. And, you know, we haven't had a discussion about house rules and consequences if you break those house rules, right? And it's like, hey, it's nothing personal, but it's, you know, I mean, does a landlord not have terms when they lease out a place? Do they not collect a security deposit? I'm not collecting security deposits here, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, like, I am establishing trust because I really do feel that someone who is more emotionally invested in me is going to be a lot more careful with me and my bodily agency than someone who just, am I allowed to swear on this?
Yes, you are.
About someone who doesn't give a fuck, right? Because they're not invested, because they walk away. And I think the question I ask myself, and I don't ever ask the person directly because they're never going to say no. I will ask myself, would it hurt this person to hurt me? Like, would it hurt them to hurt me in such a way where if they were to hurt me, it would be very impactful for them and they would work very hard to fix it? And if the answer is anything but yes, it would, then I'm not going to have sex with them, because I have a lot on the line here. You know, I've got the disproportionate risk of a symptomatic STI. You know, it's just, I have a vagina. I have greater mucous membrane surface area. I am more likely to have a symptomatic STI. I am more likely to be sexually assaulted. You know, I am more likely to release the oxytocin hormone that will have me involuntarily bonding to someone that maybe I don't even like. And let's get real, I have a disproportionate risk of not having an orgasm. All of these things, which is the thing I'm least worried about. But like you know, certainly the other things are like, I'm looking at, you know, a harm reduction here. And so, you know, certainly, and a lot of people don't like this. They're like, oh, well, you know, if you don't have sex by the third date, then I'm like, well, then don't threaten me with a good time being alone for life with cats. I'm pretty sure that that's not what's going to happen. But the idea is that I really feel a strong sense of what I have and what I'm bringing to the table. This has value, and it's not so much about labels and that sort of thing for me, but it's about like really knowing this person. They know me. They are interested in who I am as a person. There's a strong emotional connection. And this isn't something that someone can say with words. It's something that you can tell with their actions. And that really creates a solid foundation for me. That being said, like, yes, there can still be, and also I don't want to be bothered with things like, make sure you keep your condom on. Like, I'm talking to a child, you know, to keep your, they know to do it. They're just not doing it. And I was like, I don't want to be bothered with any of that. So if I'm engaging with somebody that respects me and my agency, that clears out a lot of trouble. Does it mean that, you know, I maybe date less than a woman who is, you know, down for a good time on the first date? Yeah, it does. But this is what works for me, so that I don't find myself in these situations where I just have to like fight for basics, like don't take a condom off in the middle of that act without asking, give me a break. Did you know did you know that's actually illegal in some countries now?
I did not know that.
Yeah, actually,
I did not.
In like 2018, a man was prosecuted in Germany. He actually went to jail for 8 months, and he had to pay what would be a pittance of a fine over there, like $3,500 or something. But like, he actually went to jail because somehow this woman was able to prove that, you know, she was able to prove that she had said, I will not, I believe she was an escort. The idea is, I will not have sex without a condom. A condom must be involved. And somehow she was able to prove that he actually violated that rule, and yeah, he went to jail for it. So
That's good. That's how
yeah.
it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and that happened in I think in Switzerland and Canada as well. And I just read like a month ago that in the U.S. there's no place where it's illegal in the U.S., but I think you can it could be considered a civil. What is that called? Basically, in California, as of a month ago, you can sue someone for doing that to you.
Okay.
So that's the thing, is like it gets to a certain point where it's like you try to empathize and you try to educate and you try to use logic, and at a certain point, like, all right, we just have to make this illegal because it's the only way. It's the only way. Consequences. Well, what else? You know, what are you going to do? Like, you have to have these protections. Some people need these things in order to do the right thing, unfortunately. So I would say, like, you know, to go back to your question, yeah, I would very much be, you know, very assertive in what is okay with me and what is not. And I usually don't go into encounters not sober, but that's me. So I'm a bit of an easier case because I make things very, very clear. And I hope that more people are able to get, and I understand it's a rough road, because let me tell you, it was not always like that. I was not. It takes a lot to be strong, because now you got to face someone being mad at you, shaming you, saying you don't do the things that other people are doing, making you feel like shit. And you have to have the strength to be able to stand up to all of that gaslighting and all of that potential manipulation. If you're going to be as direct like that, but let me tell you, it's 100% worth it.
Yes, there's this podcast that I was listening to. I think it was an entrepreneurship podcast, but I'm not sure. And one of the main things that the guest said, she said, you have to be okay with people being mad at you for saying no, because if she was that type of person where trying to please everyone, she wouldn't have reached where she reached, being a millionaire or making our first million in our business. Because in doing the business world, you're going to be rejected multiple times, and you're going to have to say no to family members. You're going to have to say no to even your children when you're trying to get work done and they want different things for you at that moment. So we have to learn to say no and not care about others being mad about you be saying no. And I feel like I've took that with me for the longest while now.
Yeah, so it's so hard, especially as women. We're kind of conditioned to smooth things over, right? And to make sure that nobody's upset. You know, isn't that the role of a matriarch, right? To just make sure everything runs smoothly, and that can be to your own detriment.
And even there's this other podcast by this sexologist. Her name is Jess, and she said in college she had a big issue because even when she was dating and she did not feel comfortable, and she would leave the room, the guy still expected like a hand job or something, and she would have to explain to him or whatever that's unfair. If I say no, I mean no, and does not mean that you are still supposed to get some type of pleasure out of it. That is unfair. And I don't know if it's because of the expectation of women over the years, but men tend to be like this. At times you would say no, and they would say, well, if we can't have sex, then can I have a hand job, or can I have some sort of pleasure?
Right. Well, it's social conditioning, because we know that if it doesn't happen, they're not going to die. Like, nothing bad is going to happen to them if that orgasm does not happen that time. Lord knows there's been plenty of encounters that I've had where I did not have one, and I'm lived to tell. I'm still here. But I think the idea is it's like a two-pronged thing. This is probably less prevalent now because there are more consequences, but it used to be, historically speaking, that if you didn't do what a man told you what you had to do, you get your ass kicked, and now, and you're a woman. And so, there was a high chance that you maybe had kids, and, you are the primary caretaker. So it did not behoove you to get your ass kicked because you have to, look after these children, or, maybe you're currently carrying a child or whatever. So there always, there's that fear of violence, and it still does happen. I would say less so, but it still does happen. And then the other idea is this conditioning that being in a relationship is so very, very important, right? And so to where it's like, oh, okay, sure, I will do these things that feel like a violation of my body, because if I don't, I'll lose him. Oh no. But the reality is like, if you don't enforce these standards, then they're going to stay low, right?
Exactly. And it takes a lot of time to build yourself up to believe that you are worthy enough to say no and have that respected.
Sure, I do that too. And also with other women I know, I say, hey, you're worth more than that. You know, like, come on, let's get you built up, right? Because I just feel like the more women are just like, no, I would rather walk away than have that. Then I think that like that could create a cultural shift, that these standards are important and need to be adhered to, and how important, you know, one's bodily agency is, because you only get one body, right? You can't go onto Zillow.com and buy a new body like a house. And we're so protective of our houses, right? But it's just like the bodies,
exactly.
You get this one. This is the only one you get.
Yes. I am in total agreement with everything that we have discussed today. And I'm so happy that I was able to have you here and we talked about something that's very important. And I hope that our listeners will gain and apply themselves as, you know, going forward. So yeah, I'm going to wrap it up as an effort not to make it too long. But yeah, this is a really good episode. I've learned a lot from you, and I hope you have learned a lot from me as well. And I'm looking forward to having you again, for us to speak about any other topics that will arise. I will definitely keep in contact with you as it relates to that. And yeah,
I've learned so much from you. I've learned so much from you. You know, I've learned about Jamaican law. And culture and that sort of thing. It's been such an education for me, and I am so grateful to see someone bringing a really important topic to the forefront that really, in the grand scheme of things, affects everybody in one way or another. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I will be subscribing to your show to hear more of what you have to say as well.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that.
If you made it to the end of the podcast episode, thank you guys for listening, and I hope you guys had gained value from this podcast and from everything that we spoke about in this episode. If you want to give your input, you can go ahead and check the show notes in the description to message me on social media and share your views and thoughts with me. If you also would like to be a guest on the podcast, you can go ahead and do so on my social media. Just message me or email me. I'll go ahead and respond. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you guys in another episode. Bye bye.